Hi everyone, welcome to the Telsey podcast. I'm Phil Martin from the University of York. Today I'm talking to Andrea Flores and Ben Naismith, which is really cool because back in 2008 the three of us shared a staff room at the Instituto Británico in San Jose, Costa Rica, where we taught English as a foreign language. Andrea is now a senior instructional designer at MIT Sloan School of Management, and Ben's a staff assessment scientist at Duolingo. So they talk about their journeys into these roles from language teaching, which I was really keen to hear because I know for me those thousands of hours that were racked up in the classroom were really formative. And so I think these early roles in our careers are worth talking about probably more than we do. It seems like when we talk about careers in anything, and education's no exception really, it's tempting to gloss over the roles that we see as being too junior to warrant much space on the resume. So we're unabashedly celebrating our TEFL roots today, and we talk about how adaptability, creativity, and the ability to adjust quickly to different cultures has helped us on our different career paths. Andrea and Ben talk about their journey into instructional design and EdTech respectively, how they've kept their skill sets up to date, the importance of networking, how to navigate interviews in their sectors, where the jobs market is going, and we talk about developing a portfolio of your work, the revenge of the humanities, rise of micro-credentials, and whether it's better to be a generalist rather than specialising. It was really great to reconnect with Ben and Andrea after all these years and share our TEFL memories in the classroom, and no doubt many listeners will have similar stories of these early roles that made an impact on how you view your work today. So let's get to it, and over to Ben and Andrea. Do you think there's like a direct career path from TEFL into where you guys are now? Like, did you take a career break? Is there any sort of point at which you thought, okay, I'm no longer, this is a point of separation from language teaching?
I think coming back to the US, I couldn't really take a break because if you don't have a job here, you don't have anything. Like, you don't have health insurance and all of that stuff. So I had to be a lot more intentional about when I chose to come back to the US and start working here, because I had tried to do TESOL work in the US before, but it's not the working conditions aren't as good in the US. You're kind of like patching together hourly jobs. You don't get any kind of benefits, and you're driving like all over the place trying to teach. So I knew that if I went overseas and then tried to come back, I'd probably either have to go back to school and leverage the networks from the school so that I could get a job. So that was kind of my plan, was I saved up some money, and then I came back. I applied for a master's back in the US. And then the other thing I knew was I was debating between staying in TESOL, like going into applied linguistics, or kind of branching out. So I had applied to one school in Iowa that was more language focused, and then I applied to Harvard, Massachusetts, and that was more ed tech, broader education focus. And so I think at the time, I wasn't sure how the technology was going to evolve and if language learning and language teaching would still be something that you could work in. And so I decided to go broader and also, look more at like education technology to give myself more options. So I did the master's at Harvard, and then I went into instructional design because I really actually missed the classroom, and I loved the students, and I loved thinking about teaching. And I felt like instructional design came the closest without actually being in the classroom, because in the States, you can't usually teach in the classroom in higher education unless you have a PhD. Some places you can if you have a master's. And so, I said, well, okay, if I can't be in the classroom, then I can kind of be like one step, removed from the classroom. And so that's kind of how I ended up in instructional design. So it wasn't really like I took a break. It was more of a slight pivot so that I could continue to do some of the things that I liked doing, but then also like learn new skills that were not so niche to language. And so design then opened up a lot more career pathways. So then I didn't have to stay just in education. I could kind of also transition into more like design, human-centered design, product design, ed tech. Yeah, it was a little bit of a calculated risk there.
I love the way you glossed over the fact that you're just, a master's degree from Harvard. That's
I try not to drop the H-bomb.
As one does. So what's your full role now? What's your title? And
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth. My current role is a senior instructional designer, and I work at MIT Sloan in their business school. And so typically in higher ed, the instructional designer works with faculty. Usually if it's faculty like facing, then we work with them on their residential courses. And then also we can do online course design. But then I've also done something called education design. It's a very it's like a very niche role. It only existed with this one place called the Education Design Lab. And that was bringing like human-centered design into the education and workforce space. So it was like a different flavor of design. I'm kind of more in the design build space because that's kind of where I like to be.
so Ben, have I got this right? Senior assessment scientist at Duolingo, is that right?
Yeah, so that was my title. They switch the adjective occasionally, so it's always assessment scientist. So there was senior, and now it's staff. So now I'm a staff assessment scientist, but at Duolingo, mostly on the Duolingo English Test.
Is there a straight line from the TEFL classroom to Duolingo's top head honcho dude?
Well, if it's okay for listeners, if it's okay sharing your guys' personal information, maybe going back to the TEFL or TESOL or TESOL beginnings. I mean, we all know each other from, correct me if I'm wrong, from the years 2000 and like eight somewhere?
Yeah, 2007, 2008,
Yeah.
I think.
And that sort of like, let's call it roughly like 20 years ago in an ESL classroom in Costa Rica. So we were all in the same staff room and teaching at an international house school as, I can't remember which classes you guys taught, but it was sort of, everyone did a mix of general English and young lawyers and business English and one-to-ones and all that good stuff. So just for like context, yeah, that's all sort of, at least that was for me. I think I had maybe 2 or 3 years experience at that point when I started there, but that was pretty early on in my career. I taught in Thailand and Toronto a little bit, but that was where I started to get serious, I think. I don't know. It was the same for both.
I think it was, I would just done, I think 2006 was the year when I did my first like proper teaching English. And the first one was 2005. And it was just bizarre because you could, I don't know if this is still true, but you could get into TEFL with just nothing. You know, it's if you were a native speaker, and that was, and it helped if you had blue eyes. That was really cool.
And blonde hair.
And it was like,
there was a lot of privilege that started my career as like a 20-year-old teacher in Thailand, for sure. Like an embarrassing amount of.
It was, yeah, but it was. I just had a year of just staggering around doing that, but then like in 2006, actually, kind of like went and started with the CELTA, and then I guess we all met up in 2008. I think that was the first time when I rocked up in Costa Rica, and you guys were both there. Yeah, it was the first time. It was real. I think it was one of the ones where it really hit me that this was like, we're getting good at this. If you've done it for 2 or 3 years, you're actually starting to get some capability under your belt and learning on the job. So you did Thailand first, and then Costa Rica, right?
Yeah, I did Thailand. I did a couple of years at a writing center at the college I was going to in Canada, in Toronto, and then after I graduated with my BA, I went to Costa Rica. But in terms of like path to Duolingo, it's been a pretty continuous stream of language teaching related posts ever since then, in going into teacher training, doing CELTA and Delta a lot, director of studies work both at Costa Rica and then Dubai for a while. Unlike most ESL teachers, just having lots of hats, so doing some material design and writing and editing for coursebook for different publishers like Cambridge and Mellon, examining for like IELTS and Cambridge and various testing orgs, and then I think like a lot of people who were getting more and more serious, I did an online master's through Aston while I was working. And then eventually I was one of those mature students who did a PhD late in life. So I think in my late 30s, I went to University of Pittsburgh.
I'll be a more mature student if I go PhD route, Ben.
Amazing. I wholeheartedly endorse that people in their 30s, 40s and later do go back to school if they have the desire, because I think there's so many advantages to doing it and bringing your previous life experiences and work experiences and having a better sense of self and emotional stability compared to some of my young classmates. So it was amazing. And then, from there, I was heavily invested at that point in applied linguistics and corpus linguistics and trying to understand the data and understand what works in the classroom and how people learn. And that led me to Duolingo, which was honestly like 10 minutes down the road from my university.
That's a good reason to.
I'm
in. Yeah.
I mean, partly I had visited a bunch. I knew a bunch of people who worked there just from the proximity. We were at the same events in and around Pittsburgh. So I knew it was a place that I would like to work. And so it made me apply. And I applied to numerous positions, got rejected from quite a few. And then it only takes one. It only takes one yes. So
how did you guys branch out from? So we're all familiar with the applied linguistics side of things, and like language teaching has its own kind of, is it science, kind of philosophy? Like educational base on which everything sits. And then I guess I would have moved out into just broader educational theory only sort of relatively recently. I guess it was a few years ago. I remember thinking, like, doing one of the qualifications here at York, that it was really hard to move out of just like second language acquisition and language relate, how teaching language works specifically, and how we acquire language and vocab, and getting to grips now with just like more broader learning theories. Did you guys both go through that, or do you still draw on the SLA classics and Krashen and people like that?
I think about all of them really, like when I'm thinking about things, because I feel like language learning as a teacher, I feel like in a lot of ways it makes you a really good teacher, because you can't just teach by talking to somebody, right? Which I think is the default for teaching. And so I think it broadens what you can do and how you think about teaching earlier on. And also I think it's a lot more student-centric than a lot of things that I've seen, right? But then as an instructional designer, sometimes depending on the goals, right, or depending on who the stakeholder is, I have to make trade-offs. Like it can't always be student-centered, or, maybe there's a particular reason. So I think then as I moved into instructional design, it kind of gave me more frameworks to think about. And then you adding in media and technology. So then, people learn differently. Or there's different considerations that you need to think about when you're in an online or a digital environment versus like just being in the classroom. The other thing is I guess different domains. Like for language, there's a very specific way that we kind of go about it, and different domains kind of have their own like particularities, right, that you kind of need to be aware of. It's a little bit like when you go to a country and you need to be aware of the errors that students make in that particular country. It's a little bit like that when you're like thinking about the different domains and teaching in the different domains. Yeah, so I kind of think about all of them now, like all different, like maybe I'm looking at something and I'll refer back to like, oh, this is very similar to like how you'd set up a teaching a vocabulary, activity or something like that. Because I feel like sometimes the sequencing is the same. If you're doing like a class session or something.
Yeah, I in my case, I'm more still pretty much heavily grounded in specifically language assessment. I still think about language constructs and more in sort of a SLA background. But that said, I do sometimes stop and reflect on the other skills I've picked up along the way, which are more transferable should I ever decide to transition to something else. So especially things to do with assessment more generally, if I wasn't doing language assessment. So things related to like argument-based validity, things related to psychometrics and more like statistical analyses related to assessment, aspects that I've learned from my engineering colleagues. So, my skills in coding and using Python to do what I want. So all these things have served my language assessment work, but they are sort of more generally applicable to other fields as well. But for now, I'm very happy using them for language assessment.
What was some like really early lessons that you learned from TEFL? Because for me, it's like I remember it as a time like really cutting your teeth and really like, you're going through that cycle of like, how do they call it? You're unconsciously incompetent, consciously incompetent, and so it goes on. And like,
Yeah.
how do you guys remember moving through those stages? Do you remember like being realizing you were really bad at this and just having those really formative like lesson fails that you look back on and cringe? Can you? I don't know if you, because to me these were quite instructive and they're things that I've clung on to over the years. And like,
Phil, give us an example. I'm so curious now.
Tell us about a fail, Phil.
Yeah.
I was just thinking like feeling like you have to know stuff, like, because you're kind of, you feel like you're a sage on the stage, and then you get a massive sense of being an imposter. I remember just having questions that I couldn't field really early in my career and just like dealing with it really badly, like making a bad situation worse by pretending that I sort of knew when certain relative pronouns were used in clause constructions and why an answer was wrong, and like frowning over the book, pretending that I was like in charge of the situation. But like just those stuff, like, I don't know, learning humility and kind of learning how to deal with. It's all. I feel like it's all sort of fed into how I deal with situations now. But
Sure. I mean, I think took me maybe a long time, but it took me years anyways, is that when I started out, I thought that like good teaching involved having like a meticulously detailed plan and like having I've found all these photocopyable activities and overhead projector transparencies. I mean, I'm dating myself, and like down to sort of the minute, like everything planned out, and I was going to do it, and this is going to, be good teaching somehow. And it took a long time for me to sort of, and as I got more involved with task-based teaching and ELT, and sort of just being more responsive and having more space for lessons to breathe, and being dealing with emergent language and sort of meeting learners where they were, that this is when I actually became a better teacher, I think. And that probably, it should have happened earlier if I had managed to sort of pay attention to my peers who were better teachers than me, and if I had been paying attention to my learners, probably, rather than just plowing through with these ideas I had initially about what good teaching involved.
I think I was similar to Ben. I don't know if I got to that sort of wise teacher, because I feel like you have to have taught for a long time, maybe. But I used to plan a lot. Like some of my early plans were like, especially when we had like a 3-hour class, in CELTA, you're only teaching for like 40 minutes. So then I was like, holy crap.
They were 3 hours, weren't they, in Costa Rica? Yeah.
Saturday morning was 4 hours.
God, yeah.
Yeah, 4 hours. Yeah. So then I was like, God, my lesson plans are long, especially if you're doing it like the CELTA way, So I used to stress a lot about them. And then, of course, as you get better, you don't have to add as much detail. And yes, Phil, similar to you, I think I would kind of panic a little bit about knowing all the grammar and things like that, because there are lots of things you have to know, like to answer the questions that the students have. But then as I watched or observed other teachers or talked to other teachers that were more experienced, they kind of brought me back to the idea of like, it's about the student, right? So I come back to the student and helping the student to build the skills that they need to figure out. So sometimes I would actually use, like, I would kind of at the meta level, like, look at how I was trying to figure out a particular grammar point so that I could teach the students. But then I realized that. And so then I would kind of take that into the classroom and let the students go through the same mental process that I would, right? So that they could kind of understand. That's if I had a lot of time to plan. The other thing is we're also dealing with other constraints. Sometimes in some teaching situations, you don't have a lot of time, right? And you are just kind of like, or they give you the lesson. You don't even have the freedom to think about like what lessons you want to give or how you want to structure it and things like that. I think I was always lucky to have a lot of freedom in how I was teaching it. And then I think one of my biggest fails was teaching the advanced. It was higher than the FCE. What's the next level after FCE?
CAE, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think Richard usually taught those classes, and I had to teach one, and that was like panic attack every time I had to teach it, because the students had a really high level. So you didn't have to do a lot. They wanted to talk. They were very knowledgeable about some of the grammar. They had lots of more nuanced questions as well. Because I was thinking, I don't even know if I could score a 9 on the IELTS for my English language, right? And so you're kind of going in like trying to teach students this very advanced level of English. And then also it was British English, not American English. So that added a whole nother level to it. So that was the class I probably liked the least. That one, and also teaching the kids, like the
young
because
learners,
because I didn't get any kind of certification. Somebody was like, "Oh, you don't need a cert. You just go in." And I'm like, actually, now that I know more about learning, I completely disagree about that. I think you do need to learn how to teach kids, because their attention span maybe is like 30 seconds to a minute. And so you're having to cycle through things much faster, right? Or you just have to be really creative on the spot. And also behavior management is very different with children versus adults. So those are my two. Like, I think it was, at the extreme ends of the spectrum is kind of where I struggled a little bit more.
Yeah, kids are really hard. I remember actually, Ben, I don't know if you remember this, but you observed me once on that. Do you remember we had that course? And I think you were one of the people running it.
I should not have been one of the tutors. I'll just put that out. I always fake it till I make it. And in that case, I don't think I ever made it. I just got fake.
No, but you did. You actually said something, because I was, I remember the first time I stepped into a class to teach kids, and you were observing me, and I don't know how visible this was, probably very, but I was like cold sweating, because it was I just didn't know what to do with kids. You're like, I was, they're learning completely different. I just suddenly realized as the kids were about to come in, I have no idea how kids' minds work, because I don't know how they are acquired. Like, so I went through, we used to have the CELTA stages of a lesson, which was designed. So, right, get yourself into pairs and discuss this. And then I just felt such a fool saying this. And I said this to kids because I just didn't know what to do, and reverted back to, and I think you said at the end something very diplomatic about, it's probably how I would have taught an adults class. But yeah, it's crazy. Just like suddenly realizing what you don't know in the middle of a high stakes situation. And what would you guys say about if you look at, when you look back on the CELTA now, like the way we were taught, and I don't know if it's actually changed that much. I have a colleague who still runs TEFL and TESOL training, and apparently they're kind of, it's pretty much very similar to what we would have studied like 20 years ago in the way they teach you to construct lesson plans and do things in a very sort of sequential manner. What do you think of like this kind of initiation training now? How well did it prepare you guys? And
I guess I would say that this is sort of a common, I would call it a misconception about, especially about CELTA. I mean, I was a CELTA trainer and a Delta trainer for a number of years, and as an assessor as well. So I would go around and like do quality control of other CELTA courses around the world. And I would just say that there's a massive amount of variance in how CELTA courses are set up, how they're conducted. Cambridge actually allows a lot of freedom in that there are these like sort of syllabi, these points that you have to cover in these different areas, but they can be interpreted in so many ways. So like I've seen CELTA courses that are 100% task-based learning. There's ones that are 100% dogma, ELT, that don't have traditional lesson plans. There's ones that very much focus on some that are very traditional and like PPP type frameworks throughout, some that are more eclectic, some that have a big focus on professional development, some that have a big focus on learners, some are a little different in length. So some are 4 weeks. I mean, they're often 4 weeks, but some are 5 weeks, some are 8 weeks. So, I mean, there's just a wide variety. And so I think a lot of people will say, oh, there's this traditional way or the CELTA way. And I'm like, I don't really think there is a CELTA way. I think it so much comes down to the tutors and the center. And some of it's like is just inertia, and so things don't change. But in some places, it's really sort of bringing in new ideas, and some have a more focus on helping learners with special needs, and others still don't. And so I think a lot of it, unfortunately, is luck of the draw and who your tutors are and where the center is as well.
Honestly, I still think it was one of the classes, it was one of the best taught courses that I've ever taken, especially for language. I remember thinking like, oh, like I wish my language classes in high school had been taught this way because they make it really interesting. But I also had really good trainers. And I guess there was one guy, he was a little bit famous in like the CELTA world, and I took mine in the States at a community college. So one of the trainers was a teacher at the community college, and another trainer was more of like, you know, somebody who had traveled and worked like overseas. And so I kind of got the mix of both. And it was interesting because they both had different approaches, and I would get feedback based on what their preference was versus like a standard, right? So one, you know, in some, you know, overseas, it's like you're not allowed to speak your native language in the classroom. Everything has to be in English, right? And then I remember like the students were speaking in their native language in the practice class, and one trainer, like she wanted them to. So I had observed one trainer, and she was, you know, saying like, no, they need to all be like speaking in English. So then I remember when I was practice teaching, I said to the students like in English, please. And I had the other trainer, and she said, oh, no, we don't do that here, Andrea. We allow the students to speak in their native language if they need to. So I was like, okay, I'm really confused. Like, which one is better for the students, right? Because the contexts were different, right? In the US versus and in a community college where the students are going to be exposed to lots of different languages, English, right? Right, versus like overseas where they're paying a lot of money, they want to learn the language. And so I think partly that was what was driving the like English only, right? So it was just interesting. And I had no idea since I was a beginner. I think for the CELTA, if you're coming in as a novice, it's good, right? Like it gives you enough that you can kind of go into the classroom, right? It gives you all of the tools. And I would still kind of go back and review my notes and everything, even after I'd start teaching, because then stuff would kind of make more sense, you know, once you'd started teaching. So, you know, I felt like it was enough scaffolding and structure for a brand new teacher to kind of come in and get going. So for that, and then I just had like, you know, one of my trainers, she was just like really wise. Like when I watched her with the students, she just had almost like that guru like vibe, right? Like it, like somebody who was really wise and really thoughtful. And so I just always felt so inspired when I watched her teach that I sometimes had that image in my mind when I would go into the classroom of how I wanted to be as a teacher. And she said that she had learned it from this guy. I can't remember his name. I think it was Jeff or something like that. And he was really well known, like, and basically wherever he went, like all the teachers would follow him there because he also had that kind of like just really wise, like very patient, very gentle way of being with the students and getting them to kind of like use the language and practice it. So I think I just got really, really lucky with my trainers and like being able to observe them.
Yeah, I didn't mean to get too dissy with it either. I was like, yeah, I know I gave it a bit of a... I know CELTAs get a bad rap, but I think like the idea of just that, the month-long intensive and how you have such limited space and you have to sort of prepare people as best you can. But yeah, I had a really good experience as well. I did mine in Budapest. The only thing I remember that was a bit weird was like it was this real insistence on concept checking every instruction that you deliver to the students. And what did I just say? Or else some really contrived sort of.
Yeah.
What do you sort of value in terms of skills? Like what's a priority? What does it take to do your jobs well? I don't know if you guys interview at all or if you actively look for these in recruits, but I know you said you get these questions a lot and you get asked for advice of going into ed tech. Yeah, so maybe you're probably practiced at this, so we'll start with you. What do you usually say to people when you get these kind of questions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have the boilerplate preface that a lot of it is pure luck. Some of it is privilege as well. So there are a combination of like factors outside your control. So there's no like guaranteed way. And I also have, as a result, I have massive like survivor bias in this case that I'm giving this advice because I have my current job, but I could just as easily not have it. So, and there's no one right or wrong answer. But so this is with that sort of caveat in mind, what I think landed me my work and that I observe in a lot of my colleagues is one, especially for the language teachers, is being able to transfer their skills. So like Andrew said, like a lot of those skills from being a language teacher are super applicable in a wide range of contexts related to pedagogy and using those skills, related to working with learners, being able to translate challenging, complex topics into manageable sort of chunks of information and in language that people can understand or are interested in. So all of that like is definitely still applicable. And then I guess the other one, well, maybe two other ones. One is I see myself as sort of like a jack of all trades around here. So there are super niche AI researchers who are like incredible experts on this one specific aspect that is, way out of my league, but I have enough knowledge and being able to understand their work and talk to them that I can translate that for other stakeholder groups. So I have like some coding skills, a lot of language skills, some linguistic skills, some presenting skills, some teaching skills. And so I try to bring all that together and be as useful as possible to as many people as possible, while also still feeling like an imposter so much of the time. when I'm hanging out in a psychometric meeting with all the serious statisticians and psychometricians and mathematicians, I feel out of my league. When I'm hanging out with the AI engineers and they're getting into the weeds about different models, I feel out of my league. But then, I tried to not let that show too much. So that's sort of the jack of all trades. And then the other one is like a genuine interest in the work. So everyone I work with, and I'm very lucky, everyone here is obsessed with what they do. Partly that's the system, the setup that people can pursue things that they want to pursue.
Nice.
That leads to sort of intrinsic motivation, but like no one has to be told to come into work or be checked up on. They just do the work, and in fact they have to do the opposite. They have to set boundaries to force people to have work-life balance, because the people will work outside of hours, they'll work on weekends, so they have to have really strict rules, like you can't carry over your vacation. You have to use all your vacation days. So like your managers are like breathing down your neck, like, please take your vacation.
Well, that's good.
Working with people like that. So I think a real interest in what we do.
The jack of all trades thing, I think but that's supposed to be a real, this is what, when I'm listening to, highly erudite people, I think it was the guy who's the CEO of Anthropic.
Oh, Dario Amodei.
Possibly.
Yeah.
They were talking about this the other day on Newsnight, and I mean the agility, this, like, they didn't say jack of all trades, but this ability to, reinvent yourself, apply transferable skills across domains, and just kind of is just going to be really important.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when you think about all the different contexts we had to teach in, we were in different countries. Literally, you're adapting to a whole cultural context in every 1 to 2 years, right? Like, most people have not had that experience of adapting to, like, transportation systems, language systems, plus, like, teaching, and relating to people. So, and then... So, like, I don't know, sometimes you're teaching in a classroom, sometimes, at one place when I was teaching in Chile, they had just changed their bus system over from private to, like, I know, government controlled. So there weren't enough buses. So the lines for the buses were super long, and you had to take the bus to get to your class. And so it wasn't like at a school, like, in Costa Rica. So most of the classes you had to take buses to, and the buses were so crowded. I remember, lugging my little roller backpack around because I didn't want to carry it. And it was like a children's roller backpack with like Mickey Mouse on it or something. And trying to get on the bus. And the bus was so packed that I got the bag in there and one leg, and then the door closed. And so the other leg was still sticking outside of the bus, and the bus started moving, Or then like teaching in some classroom that was like adult students, but at an elementary school. And in Chile, they didn't have like central air or heating. So it was like freezing cold. Like standing in front of the classroom with like a heater, like trying to keep you warm, right? To like teaching a winemaker on a vineyard, right? So like every class would be different. And you'd have to like just adapt on the spot, right? Or a teacher would call in sick, and then all of a sudden you'd have to go in and teach the lesson without any preparation, right? And with students you didn't know, and a place, so I don't know. I just felt like in terms of adaptability and agility, English language teaching, like for the win right there, because you're having to adapt so much. And I think it's hard to like actually articulate what are the actual skills. The other thing that I think for me in the design space is it really improves your lateral thinking because you've seen so many different realities, right? Because you've lived in different countries and almost like worlds, right? You've seen so many different realities that most people like who've never really left, or if they've only traveled for a couple of weeks, they can't see the world through those kinds of lenses. And so when you're looking at innovation, you're looking at design, you're looking at trying to think about things from a very different lens to see if you can come up with something new. Like having that perspective and having that experience, I think is really powerful. It's just that it's hard to articulate like in a job interview, right? You're like a jack of all trades, right? But then I've just noticed that I'm just able to, like I do especially well in startup type environments that have like very little structure. Nobody knows what you need to do. Nobody knows what direction we're supposed to go. We don't, and like just being able, I feel like sometimes I feel like a ninja, right? Like you're in the middle of a fight and everybody's coming at you and I'm just like,
because I would say, I was going to ask if you're in an interview, I don't know, thinking of the culture in MIT, I don't know, it's like, might be a bit intimidating, but when I think of like instructional design, I would be tempted to kind of talk about familiarity with specific tools. I would really want to show my expertise with, I don't know if they're still using Articulate or, the Adobe suites and things like that, and show your technical expertise. But it seems like kind of what we should be emphasizing in these interviews is all the things you're just talking about. So like, not necessarily the buses in Chile, but that kind of thing. Like if you coped with these environments before, I mean, do you think that would like hold stock with people who are interviewing you in a job, where you're demonstrating how you've coped with all these, different nationalities, different languages, different geographical environments? How would that go down?
I think it actually depends on the context. So like if the organization is large and fairly mature and really structured, we probably wouldn't need those skills as much because everything is heavily managed, right, and structured. But for some instructional design positions where you might be like, it kind of tends to have a startup vibe where maybe a company has never used an instructional designer before, or they really want to improve their training. And so they want to bring in somebody with like instructional design background. Then it is more of a startup kind of environment because, it's not always clear what needs to happen or what needs to be done. So then you do need to be more agile on top of also knowing the tools. Although I'm not tied to tools. And I think as you talk to more designers like who've been in it longer, because it's just a tool, really, right? The real knowledge is like, what do you do with the tool? How do you actually structure the learning? How do you sequence the learning? Can the learner actually transfer it or produce it, right? After they've gone through all these really beautiful, like Articulate, Rise modules, right? Because if they can't do that, then the learning is probably not that good, no matter how pretty it looks and, how gamified it is. And so that's the things that I always think about, right? And so my only beef with instructional design is it tends to, sometimes because the stakeholders we work with are not as knowledgeable about learning, they become more focused on structuring and organizing and developing the content rather than thinking about what is the purpose of this training and what is it that you want somebody to actually do after they go through the training. And that requires a very different mindset than like packaging and producing content. So that has been my only beef, is that sometimes you can feel like a content factory versus like actually getting, whereas language teaching, you can really see if the students are learning because they can produce the language. And I think that was always like a very satisfying thing about language teaching.
Yeah, I think with instructional design, it might be, I know there's a tension between like, what works versus what people want sometimes. And they want something snazzy and engaging, which doesn't always.
May or may not actually support learning.
Is there an equivalent, Ben, in that in what you do? Do you have a sort of people are setting demands which perhaps doesn't jibe well with our current state of how learning actually works?
Yeah, I mean, it's different tensions on the app side. So working on the Duolingo app and working in the assessment, I think there's always those tensions in place, and from different stakeholders. So like on a language test, a high stakes proficiency test, some stakeholder groups will prioritize, well, the test takers will naturally prioritize price and ease of access, and doesn't meet their goals of allowing them to, go to the schools they want to go to. They're not so concerned about sort of construct validity or some of the aspects of security. And then, the institutional stakeholders might be more concerned with concordances and cut scores and that type of evidence, because it helps them to make decisions. And then researchers might be more concerned with considerations related to construct coverage and authenticity and things like that. So, trying to find that balance is a challenge. Just going back to one of Andrew's points about how do you articulate these skills? Well, one of the sort of operating principles here that I think is great and comes from a teaching background as well is show, don't tell. So something I recommend to people who are interested in these types of jobs is to come to not just with a CV and describing your transferable skills, but actually having some sort of portfolio.
Yeah, definitely.
Of things you can actually show people. So, and there's, a huge variety. It depends on the job, whether that's, okay, I've got these types of publications, whether that's academic research or a course book or, something physical like that. It could be like a GitHub repo where you have examples of things you've coded. It could be volunteer like websites that you've created or, data sets that you've put together that people can use in the real world. So I think actually being able to point people to things that they can actually click on and see and look at and give a sense of, oh yeah, if I hire this person, they've got these degrees or these, they say they have these skills on their CV, but what's this actually going to look like in actuality? Is this the kind of thing I could imagine being useful in my context?
I've noticed it's increasingly common now for people to have their own website, where it used to be a kind of a niche thing and now it's fairly common. Would you, for people getting into your industries, would you kind of expect that? Is that sort of good practice at this stage, just to sort of do what you were just talking about, Ben, put your portfolio on
I mean, I have my own website just because it's, I got it from Google. It's like $1 a month. And basically I just link it to my GitHub repo website. And so it just transfers people if you click on my name, and I just have, it's super simple, but I think it depends on the job. Some people just have really elaborate LinkedIn profiles and that works. And that, like people who code, I think having like a GitHub repo is super common as well. And you can, store things there. Publications, if you can link to your Google Scholar or it depends like what the job values. But some sort of evidence.
Well, I can give you a little background from the workforce perspective. So there's a lot of talk in the workforce space about like skills and like skills-based like economy. And so instead of having a degree, which is sort of a proxy for like skills that you're supposedly bringing, they're really getting into like the idea of micro credentials. So like really getting very specific about which particular skills you have. Like let's say it's oral communication. What does oral communication mean, right? And so you'd have like these kind of badges, right, for like each of the subcompetencies that sit under oral communication, right? So then now all of a sudden you could imagine like a person like made up of all these little badges, right, of all their little skills. So that's one area. The other thing that is kind of a little bit more on the innovation front is the idea of like a digital wallet. So as you collect all of these micro credentials in all aspects of your life, not just in formal learning, right, you can put them in this digital wallet, which then you own and then you can take with you, right, as you apply for jobs. Or like maybe your skills sit in some type of repository that an employer can then tap into and say, this is the skills profile I'm looking for, and kind of pull up, people who might fit those skills. So that's one way. For an instructional designer, yes, usually the designer has a portfolio. I haven't had one. I probably shouldn't say this, but yeah, I don't actually have one because it's usually, I don't know, usually the way I've gotten jobs is I've either worked with people in the past, so they already know me. And so sometimes that's what I'll do is I will network and take on like small projects so that people are familiar with how I work and what I do. And then I can kind of get referrals that way versus like having a portfolio. But that's actually something I'm thinking about just to do because like you said, like my skill set is so broad. Sometimes it's really hard to like go to a job. So I'll say, okay, this job only requires like this segment of my skill set. So then that's what I'll, focus on, or it only requires this segment of my skill set. So the other thing that I have been seeing is that there is going to probably be more of a demand for generalists rather than experts, right? Because AI is helping to close skills gaps, right? So now, like, if you are a novice, you can get past novice stage fairly quickly with AI, right? To a point where you can actually do something that's more productive. And because it can tell you about almost anything, right? You can at least get to like, in language terms, like into intermediate stage, right? In terms of things that you can do, right? Like now it's easy for anybody to start a business because they can do so much with just AI and AI tools. So that's kind of a shift that's starting to happen. So it might be that the kind of skills that generalists have will be very useful. But yeah, just coming back to like a portfolio. Yes, I think it's really great. AI can spin one up for you in about 15 minutes. Right. And then you could, like literally, literally it created my website and I was like, oh, that's nice. Right. So then it's more about figuring out what you want to put on the website, what you want to say, crafting your story and your narrative. Yeah. Cool. I think those are all different, portfolios definitely, I think in design especially, are very, very...
I've heard from multiple sources now, this idea of being a generalist is really kind of like, it seems to be totally makes sense. I've also heard about this idea of the revenge of the humanities. So if someone's got their linguistics degree, so they're on applied linguistics, thinking about like, where to go next in a career from language teaching and looking at your areas. Are you... in terms of qualifications to do next, I mean, Andrew, you're just talking about micro-credentials and how do you get to be more of a generalist? Because all qualifications seem to be leading you down specific paths, especially if you're looking at PhDs or something. You're getting super specialized in one specific thing and you're committing yourself to get even more specialized in that over a 5-year period. Is there any sense of advice that you could give people in terms of like looking for their next qualification? Is a philosophy degree something that has a certain appeal at this stage, or should we be looking to get small and specialized?
Well, AI companies are looking for philosophers, so they might actually become quite popular, philosophy, and also people with English and literature backgrounds because of the writing and their ability to tell stories because AI writing is so generic. So definitely I've seen that in the headlines.
I've also seen that in the headlines, but just in and again, this is just my own small sphere of people I know. I have also heard this this trend of the revenge of the humanities, and maybe on aggregate level or broad scale, this is true. I know a lot of people with PhDs who are still struggling to find work, and that is incredibly and that especially people who, because I'm more familiar with like the linguistic side of things, that people who don't have a wide skill set even within linguistics are struggling. So like if you've really nichely focused on, and it's super interesting and there's lots of like value in terms of building the global knowledge base, but if you're only focused on one aspect of sociolinguistics for one small group of speakers, you can definitely take those skills for like qualitative analysis and become a UX researcher, for example. But it's a lot of work to sort of sell those transferable skills without any other concrete skills that you can show would like immediately apply. So if you don't have any coding skills, if you don't have any quantitative skills, like if you've sort of really pigeoned yourself, I still think it's, at least for now, and at least the people I know, they're the ones who are struggling, who end up just like in these academic cycles of like, oh, and now I got to do another postdoc because I couldn't find a tenure position and I couldn't find an industry job. And they just sort of like endlessly go further down the academic rabbit hole. So I've heard this too. I'm like slightly skeptical, I guess I would say.
So I want to finish on then, like, happiest memories from TEFL classroom. What do you guys cherish? What makes you smile when you think about those days 20 years ago?
Oh my God, so many things. Like, I feel like that was like the brightest period of my life was all the years that I taught. Like, all of it. Like the crazy teaching, the crazy context, the students. I mean, one of my favorite, all of my favorite ones is when the students would take you out, like once the class is finished, and they would always, like I had my Costa Rican group take me and they had a dinner and they got me like gifts. And then my Vietnamese students took me and we went and had like grilled goat, sitting at the little tables. Like I just love that. Really just like love the students. And they asked such great questions and they would get so excited, like trying to use the language, yeah. And just all the things that came up, they were all like just really bright memories in my mind. I think also English language teaching is very good for your health. You're not sitting at a desk all day.
Yeah, I remember it being
right?
exhausting. That's, teaching for, 20 to 30 hours a week. And
yeah, I say that the same for me. So a lot of my lifelong friends are
definitely
students and ex-teachers, and like going out with them. And, I've had roommates who are ex-students or like vacations or, so a lot of good friends and good times outside of the classroom. Within the classroom, I guess the two that stand out was one, I set up this volunteer teaching program. I think anytime you have to do like volunteer teaching with students who have less resources and less access, and you're just so incredibly like motivated and grateful for the opportunity, it's just like an absolute joy to be in the classroom with them.
Yes.
So that was one. And then because I'm in assessment now, I guess my all-time favorite assessment was doing the Young Learner Cambridge exams. 7-year-old where you have the picture and you're like, my monkey is on the tree. And they say, oh, the monkey is under the tree. And just like, I can't believe I'm getting paid to spend my day just like hanging out with awesome kids while they like describe these like comic book stories. And yeah, those are my all-time favorites.
That is awesome. I don't think I ever got to do that.
I'm one. Young Learners, Starters, Movers, Flyers, absolute best.
There's an Eddie Izzard flavor to that, isn't it? Then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, Ben, some of my favorite memories were of the kids. Like when I taught 2-year-olds in Vietnam, they all wore these little handkerchiefs. I guess because the pollution was kind of bad, so they would always get like runny noses and stuff like that. So they always had to wear these little handkerchiefs. And I'd sit in this semicircle of like 18 to 20, like 2 to 3-year-olds, and we'd all be like singing songs, and they love puppets and things like that, right? And then another one, I think a song was part of the book or whatever. And I was like, God, this is boring to do the song. So I was like, I'm going to choreograph a dance. I'm going to make the kids do the dance to this song. And so that's what we did. And they loved it. Like they were all like, doing the dance. And I was like, okay.
PPR.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah. What happened to that? Right. What have we not talked about that we should? Is there anything, lessons learned or anything? What are you guys doing next with your roles? Have you got any sort of career trajectories in mind that you're working towards?
I guess I'm trying to, I can honestly say I love my current job, so I'm trying to hold on to it. So that's, I mean, that's sort of in jest, but yeah, no, continuing on the current same trajectory, working on Duolingo products, trying to make sure that education is accessible.
I mean, I've already started shifting into the AI space. So I am probably, I'm doing a lot of it in my current role as well, is just like thinking about workflow redesign. So it's not even really related to instruction. It's, thinking about workflow redesign, agents, those kinds of things, building with agents, but also like AI enablement. So that is where like some of the instruction comes from, is like building AI literacy and stuff for other people who are going to be using it within an institution or an organization. And then the other piece that is sort of a longer term goal is I'm not really crazy about all the narrative that's currently being, spread around by the AI companies around like this path is inevitable, all jobs will be displaced. Like, it's very dystopian. And so I'm thinking like, well, why do we have to choose that narrative? Like they're making it sound like we have no choice, and we do have a choice. And so I think as a designer and a builder, like you can always build something different and you don't always have to go with what somebody's telling you. So I think that's a longer term goal. And so I'm involved in like a AI 2030, which is like responsible AI organization that's kind of national, international, and really thinking about ways that we can engage the community and kind of bring also some of those responsible AI principles into like on the ground work as well as like more like community engagement and things like that. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I don't know where I will go necessarily, but maybe the path will emerge as I continue to work in it.
Yeah, I think that's what we're all hoping.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, guys. Nice one. The class of 2008.
Yes.
Instituto Británico.
Yes. The best.
Surely there's a reunion.